Good afternoon, naimbag nga malim. Kaputa, awan ti signal ti wifi. Ket in record ko dito nga klase tayo. So ti pangalaak ti klase tayo ket the Compendium of the Social Doctrine of the Church. Dito ket report ti Group 1. Ha? Okay, Group 1 ket awan pay ti grade kanyak. Group da Andrea ket orayek lang dagiti pag-apology yo met kas grupo kanyak pang-explain nyo nang runa jay naka-assign nga mangi-send ko makanyak through email naawat kum de jay videos yo in post ko pa jay YouTube yun lang naman no, sana matuto kayo sa mga pagkakamali ninyo no. Kapag mga ganun mga bagay na hindi ka makapag-send ng email kay bagaan dakmet no, madali lang naman akong kausap. No? Father, nahirapan kami, please. No? Ganon. Mga protocols. Kasi kapag may trabaho kayo later on, kailangan kayong magpaalam. No? Mga protocols ay kailangan nyong gawin. Okay? So, wala pa kayong grade na group 1. Kaya, make a group effort to make an apology nang runa dyan nang i-send yun ang inuuray ko di nag-send kanyak ti email ti video ket di lang met nya nag-send lang awan met ti apology na kin-explain na sinudsud ko no apay nga naladaw nga nang i-send no apay hana nga nag-message hana met nga sinungsong bata hanga nag-message pa det na nalipatak bla bla bla. Okay, so ito no, so our topics about justice. Kaya ang justice nang nangruna iti social justice ket maawatan tayo kada iti compendium of the social doctrine of the church. Ti explain ko kanya itata. Andito may libro rin ako na compendium. Okay, kung gusto niyo mag-order ng ganitong libro, just tell me, I will order for you. So ang pag-aralan natin ngayon ay yung sa social doctrine. Yan, ito talaga yung sa libre lang ito sa internet. Pero mas maganda kapag ngayon ito kasi pwede mong sulat-sulatan. So pag-aralan natin yung social doctrine, evangelization, and human promotion. Pindot natin. Okay, yan. Punta tayo sa page na yan. Okay, ano bang connection ng social doctrine ng evangelization and human promotion? So sa part na yan, sa number 66, okay? Sabi po rito, evangelization will be incomplete if it did not take into account the mutual demands continually made by the gospel and by the concrete personal and social life of man. Ti panag-evangelization ket saan nga kompleto no hanga kitain hantoy kitain ti demands ti gospel iti concrete personal ken social nga biag ti tao. So sabi pa rito, this includes links of anthropological order. Because the man who is to be evangelized is not an abstract being, but is subject to social and economic questions. So, deto'y tao nga i-evangelize sa'yo, ket saan nga tao ti abstrakto. Kaya may isang nga tao nga subject to adati social reality na, ken economic questions na. Haan lang anthropological order, uray pa ti theological order anjam, no? Since one cannot dissociate the plan of creation, hamo mabaling nga pagsinaen ti creation, kan ti plano ni Apo Diyos ti redemption. No? Talaga yung there is no redemption, God will not save us if He did not create us. No? So creation and redemption or salvation, they come together. So the latter, yung creation touches the very concrete situations of injustice to be combated and of justice to be restored. So sabi pa dyan, okay, how in fact can one proclaim the new commandment without promoting injustice and in peace the true, authentic advancement of man? So yan para sa akin ang connection ng social doctrine, evangelization, and human promotion. Okay, punta naman tayo sa the rights and duties of the church. Okay? So yan. There is no intention to usurp or invade the duties of others or to neglect her own, nor is there any thought of pursuing objectives that are foreign to her mission. Okay. Sabi dyan, ito yung right ng simbahan. The church has the right to be a teacher for mankind, a teacher of the truth of faith, the truth not only of dogmas, but also of the morals whose source lies in human nature itself and in the gospel. Kaya ang karapatan ng simbahan ay magturo, lalong-lalo na sa moralidad. Okay, next naman. Punta naman tayo sa duty. This right of the church is at the same time a duty, because she cannot forsake this responsibility without denying herself and her fidelity to Christ. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. So, hindi lang karapatan, kundi responsibilidad ng simbahan na na magsalita, magturo, may panggap iti social doctrine. Okay, sabi ba rito? Yan. Religion must not be restricted to the purely private sphere. Saan lang nga private, pribado, haawan ti connection na ti public life ti religion. On the other hand, the Christian message must not be relegated to a purely otherworldly salvation, incapable of shedding light on our earthly existence. Okay. So tatan, DJ Group 1, ket in report da detoy, paunegek lang, detoy nature of the church's social doctrine. Okay? So, tatlong part lang dito. Okay? So, umuna, the social doctrine ket may nga knowledge illuminated by faith. No? So, may nga panagadal, panagamu, nga sinelnagan iti pamati. Kaya sabi dyan, the church social doctrine was not initially thought of as an organic system, but was formed over the course of time through the numerous interventions of the magisterium on social issues. Alright? Next, punta tayo sa number 73. The church social doctrine is therefore of a theological nature, specifically theological moral, since it's a doctrine aimed at guiding people's behavior. So nga rod ti social doctrine ket parte ti moral theology. Siya estudyante ket nagadal jay Spain ti major ko ket moral and spiritual theology. Number 74. The church social doctrine finds its essential foundation in biblical revelation and in the tradition of the church. So, di jay niya. So, dito yung social doctrine kep nakabatay iti Biblia. Okay, sabi pa dyan, faith which receives the divine word and puts it into practice effectively interacts with reason. Okay? Number 75, faith and reason represents the two cognitive paths of the church's social doctrine, revelation and human nature. So nga rod ti social doctrine ket usaren na ti panagrason ken ti pamati, faith and reason. May kadwa nga nature ti social doctrine ket in friendly dialogue with all branches of knowledge. The church social doctrine avails itself of contributions from all branches of knowledge, economy, sociology, lahat po. Whatever their source, and has an important interdisciplinary dimension, pati po ang history, no? Geopolitics, etc. Above all, the contribution of philosophy is essential. Napaka-importante ti filosofiya iti social doctrine of the church. Amoy apo ket syakit da kami na seminarista ti umanang adalen mi ket isu ti AB philosophy. Ako po ay licensed sa ecclesiastical philosophy. Lahat po ng pari ay nag-aral ng filosofiya. Napaka-importante unay ti filosofiya. Ngarod dagkayo nga grade 12 ket inadal yo idi iti yung introduction to the philosophy of the human person. This contribution has already been seen in the appeal to human nature as a source and to reason as the cognitive path of faith itself. Okay? So, agkape-tipe lang apo, agkape tayo. Affirming that the church social doctrine is part of theology rather than philosophy does not imply a disowning or underestimation of the role or contribution of philosophy. Napaka-importante ti papel ti filosofiya iti social doctrine of the church or man nga imbaga tayo nga ti social doctrine ket parte ti moral theology. In fact, philosophy is a suitable and indispensable instrument for arriving at a correct understanding of the basic concepts of the church social doctrine. Concepts such as person, dito apo ket contribution ti filosofiya, person, society, freedom, conscience, hanga conscience, ha? Taddo makada kayo report ng nangro na group 1 ket conscience kun nada ti conscience haan nga conscience or consciences hanga consciences. All right? Ethics, law, justice, the common good, solidarity, subsidiarity, the state. Deto'y apo ket mas maawatan tayo iti filosofiya. A significant contribution to the church's social doctrine comes also from human sciences and the social sciences. When? Okay. In view of that particular part of the truth that it may reveal, no branch of knowledge is excluded as long as it is truth ket i-absorb the social doctrine of the church. This attentive and constant openness to other branches of knowledge makes the church social doctrine reliable, concrete, and relevant. Okay? Ken may katlo, dito iti may katlo nga importante nga nature ti church social doctrine. I-memorize yo dito yung talo Ti umuna ket knowledge illuminated by faith. May kadwa in friendly dialogue with all branches of knowledge. Kanti may katlo, an expression of the church ministry of teaching. The social doctrine of the church apu ket parte iti panangisuro ti simbaan. Kasjay imbaga tayo nga mesa kadag iti right ti simbaan ket iisuro na kada tayo iti morality based on faith and reason. Sabi po diyan, the social doctrine belongs to the church because the church is the subject that formulates it, disseminates it, and teaches it. So, dito nga social doctrine ket bagi iti simbaan. Alright. So, ngarod, mapan tayo ti next lesson tayo. Okay, mapan tayo ti history. Okay? So, medyo atidog dito yung apo. Alright. So, the church social doctrine in our time, historical notes. Dito, dati YouTube ko dito, yung insend ko kanyayo last week. Ngayon, may explain ko ulit, syempre, the last year met dejay, syempre, mas mas imunigmetten ti panagawat ko kada ito nga the history of the social doctrine of the church. Okay, basahin tayo apo. The term social doctrine, kas in report ti Group 1, goes back to Pope Pius XI. Okay? And designates doctrinal corpus concerning issues relevant to society, which from the encyclical letter Rerum Novarum. Dati apo, may deta Rerum Novarum of Pope Leo XIII. May deta no Rerum Novarum Leo XIII, developed in the Church through the magisterium of the Roman Pontiffs. Ano ti Roman Pontiffs? Ket dagit ni Santo Papa and the bishops in communion with them. The Church's concern for social matters certainly did not begin with that document. No? Ti simbaan ket concern mit apo ti may mapasamak iti aglawlaw, iti lipunam, iti pagilyam. Yeah? Okay? Ngem hanga ng rugi kada ito Rerum Novarum ti concern ti simbaan iti social matters. For the Church has never failed to show interest in society. Merong interest ang simbahan sa lipunan. Nonetheless, the encyclical Rerum Novarum marks the beginning of a new path. Ngem talaga ti nang rugyanam ti social doctrine of the Church, or what we call the social encyclicals, the social teachings, ket deto Rerum Novarum. Take note of this, ha? Rumwar deto iti exam. Grafting itself onto a tradition hundreds of years old. Okay, so 100 years na po ang Rerum Novarum. Okay, more than 100 years. It signals a new beginning and a singular development of the Church's teaching in the area of social matters. Agyaman tayo ti Rerum Novarum ni Leo XIII, ta narugyanan deto yun na panangisursuro, official nga panangisursuro, ti simbaan may panggep iti social matters. In her continuous attention to men and women living in society, the Church has accumulated a rich doctrinal heritage. This has its roots in sacred scripture, especially the Gospels and the apostolic writings, and takes on shape and body, beginning from the fathers of the Church and the great doctors. Okay, and yan po. And the great doctors of the Middle Ages, constituting a doctrine in which, even without explicit and direct magisterial pronouncements, the Church gradually came to recognize her competence. So, in the 19th century, ibig sabihin 1800, kapag yan ibig sabihin ng 19th century, 1800 to 1899, events of an economic nature produce a dramatic social, political, and cultural impact. At dati napasamak iti 19th century nga nang pabaliw iti social, political, and cultural nga panagbiag ti tattao. Events, yan po, connected with the industrial revolution. Kaya nasawin industry. Nung kaya nasawin ket adadagadi fabrika, yan niya. May isang revolution dito. Profoundly changed centuries-old societal structures, raising serious problems of justice and posing the first great social question. Ipanggip iti the labor question. Ya, adadagadi industriya. Ya, o may da iti fabrika, ken anyaman dita, iti syudad, ket kasano nga ti labor, the question of work, prompted by the conflict between capital and labor. Dagiti akimbagi ti fabrika, ken dagiti agtrabaho. Ya? In this context, the Church felt the need to become involved and intervene in a new way. Dapat maki-intervene, mag-involve ti simbaan, the res nove. Yan po. New things brought about by these events represented a challenge to her teaching and motivated her special pastoral concern for masses of people. A new discernment of the situation was needed, a discernment capable of finding appropriate solutions to unfamiliar and unexplored problems. Okay, nga tatakit adalin tayo ti from rerum novarum to our own day. Yeah. Okay, so in response to the first great social question ni Pope Leo the 13th, okay, talita, promulgated the first social encyclical. Nasulod-sud di kada kayo anya ti first social encyclical ket isu ti Rerum Novarum. Dito yung encyclical ket examine na the condition of salaried workers, which is particularly distressing for industrial laborers who languished in inhumane misery. So kaso ti mapaspasamak di kaasimid dagiti sweldo dagiti agtab trabaho. The labor question is dealt with according to its true dimensions. It is explored in all its social and political expressions, so the proper evaluation may be made in the light of the doctrinal principles founded on revelation and on natural law and morality. Rerum Novarum lists errors that give rise to social ills. It excludes socialism as a remedy and expounds with precision and in contemporary terms the Catholic doctrine on work. So isura na ti Catholic doctrine ti work, the right to property, okay, the principle of collaboration instead of class struggle, ang kumang aglaban dagiti kapitalista ken dagiti trabahador. As the fundamental means of social change, the principle of collaboration, saan nga class struggle. The rights of the weak, the dignity of the poor, and the obligations of the rich, the perfecting of justice through charity, on the right to form professional associations. All right. Rerum Novarum became the document inspiring Christian activity in the social sphere and the point of reference for this activity. The encyclical's central theme is the just ordering of society, in view of which there is the obligation to identify criteria of judgment that will help to evaluate existing socio-political systems and to suggest lines of action for their appropriate transformation. Rerum Novarum dealt with labor question using a methodology that will become a lasting paradigm, hanga paradigm, paradigm for successive developments in the church social doctrine. The principles affirmed by Pope Leo XIII will be taken up again and studied more deeply in successive social encyclicals. The whole of the church social doctrine can be seen as an updating, a deeper analysis and expansion of the original nucleus of principles presented in Rerum Novarum. So aming nga kakabsat iti dagiti social encyclicals no, social teachings ket isu ti panag-update da lang, panagpalalim ng nila sa Rerum Novarum. With this courageous and far-sighted text, Pope Leo XIII gave the church citizenship status, as it were, amid the changing realities of public life, and made an incisive statement which became a permanent element of the church social teaching. He affirmed that serious social problems could be solved only by cooperation between all forces, and added that in regard to the church, her cooperation will never be found lacking. All right. So dito mapaspasamak in the 19th century. Ngurod mapantayo ti rugi ti 20th century at the beginning of the 1930s, following the grave economic crisis of 1929, dati apo, si Pope Pius XI published encyclical Quadragesimo Anno. Okay, ano sabihin ka, the 40 years kalpasan ti Rerum Novarum. Yeah, 40 years. All right. Commemorating yan. Pope The Pope reread the past in the light of the economic and social situation in which the expansion of the influence of financial groups, both nationally and internationally, was added to the effects of industrialization. Yung mga financial groups. Itong 1929, pag-aralan nyo, i-research nyo, i-Google search ninyo, yung nangyari sa Wall Street, itong mga financial groups. It was the post-war period after ng World War I, during which totalitarian regimes were being imposed in Europe, even as the class struggle was becoming more bitter. Okay? The encyclical warns about the failure to respect the freedom to form associations and stresses the principles of solidarity and cooperation in order to overcome social contradictions. The relationships between capital and labor must be characterized by cooperation. Okay? Quadragesimo Anno confirms the principle that salaries should be proportional not only to the needs of the worker but also to those of the worker's family. Nagpasweldo tayo kakabsat, haan lang nga di tao nga trabaho, ngem kitain tayo medjay entero nga pamilya na. Okay? The state in its relation with the private sector should apply the principle of subsidiarity, a principle that will become a permanent element of the Church's social doctrine. The encyclical rejects liberalism, understood as unlimited competition between economic forces, and reconfirms the value of private property, recalling its social function. In a society in need of being rebuilt from its economic foundations, a society which itself becomes completely the question to deal with, Pius XI felt the duty and the responsibility to promote a greater awareness, a more precise interpretation, and an urgent application of the moral law governing human relations with the intent of overcoming the conflict between classes and arriving at a new social order based on justice and charity. Si Pope Pius XI did not fail to raise his voice against the totalitarian regimes that were being imposed in Europe during his pontificate. Already on 29 of June 1931, he had protested against the abuse of power by the totalitarian fascist regime in Italy with the encyclical Non abbiamo bisogno. He published the encyclical Mit brennender Sorge on the situation of the Catholic Church under the German Reich on 14 March 1937. Okay. The text of Mit brennender Sorge was read from the pulpit of every Catholic church in Germany after having been distributed in the greatest secrecy. The greatest of secrecy. The encyclical came out after years of abuse and violence and had been expressly requested from Pope Pius XI by the German bishops after the Reich had implemented ever more coercive and repressive measures in 1936, particularly with regard to Hitler Youth Movement. So ito na po yung World War II. No? Kaya maganda rin i-research niyo yung World War I and World War II. No? The Pope spoke directly to priests, religious, and lay faithful, giving them encouragement and calling them to resistance until such time that a true peace between church and state would be restored. In 1938, with the spreading of anti-Semitism, si Adolf Hitler ng Germany ay pinapatay nila ang mga Jews. Anti-Semitism ang tawag doon. Pope Pius XI affirmed, spiritually, we are all Semites. With the encyclical letter Divini Redemptoris, okay, yan po, on atheistic communism, ito yung USSR, United State of Soviet Russia, and Christian social doctrine, Pope Pius XII, okay, si Pope Pius XII na to, hindi na si Pope Pius XI, offered a systematic criticism of communism, describing it as intrinsically perverse and indicated that the principal means for correcting the evils perpetuated by it could be found in the renewal of Christian life, the practice of evangelical charity, the fulfillment of the duties of justice at both the interpersonal and social levels in relation to the common good, and the institutionalization of professional and interprofessional groups. Okay? In the Christmas radio message of Pope Pius XII, together with other important interventions in social matters, magisterial reflection on a new social order guided by morality and law and focusing on justice and peace become deeper. His pontificate covered the terrible years of the Second World War and the difficult years of Reconstruction. He published no social encyclicals, no? But in many different contexts, Pope Pius XII, he constantly showed his concern for the international order, which had been badly shaken. During the war and the post-war period, for many people of all continents and for millions of believers and non-believers, the social teaching of Pope Pius XII represented the voice of universal conscience. Okay, which is with its a moral authority and prestige, Pope Pius XII brought the light of Christian wisdom to countless men of every category and social level. One of the characteristics of Pope Pius XII's intervention is the importance he gave to the relationship between morality and law. He insisted on the notion of natural law as the soul of the system to be established on both the national and international levels. Kaya napaka-importante po ang natural law. No? The law on human nature is the law of reason. He insisted, okay, another important aspect of Pope Pius XII's teaching was his attention to the professional and business classes, called to work together in special way for the attainment of the common good. Due to his sensitivity and intelligence in grasping the signs of the times, Pope Pius XII can be considered the immediate precursor of Vatican Council II, Vatican II, and of the social teaching of the popes who followed him. The 1960s, in the 20th century, the 21st century, no, bring promising prospects. I mean, recovery after the devastation of the war, yung World War II, the beginning of decolonization, no, pinanawan na tayo ti Spain, ti Amerika, ti Pilipinas, kada duma pa yung lugar nga nasyon, and the first timid signs of a thaw in the relations between the American and Soviet blocs. Aglaban apo no, buyain nyo di YouTube, the Cold War, the American nga capitalism, democracy, no, and Soviet yung sa communism. Okay? This is the context within which Blessed Pope John the 23rd, ngayon na Saint John the 23rd na siya, okay, reads deeply into the signs of the times. The social question is becoming universal, okay, and involves all countries. Okay. Together with the yan, together with the labor question and industrial revolution. Yan. There come to the four problems of agriculture, of developing regions, of increasing populations, and those concerning the need for global economic cooperation. Inequalities that in the past were experienced within nations are now becoming international. So, nga ti problema ti Pilipinas, ket saan lang nga Pilipinas em. Ti problema, ket problema iti entire world, no? Entire world. Ti problema. Inequalities that in the past were experienced within nations are now becoming international, make the dramatic situation of the third world ever more evident. No? Tayo, ang Pilipinas, hindi pa first world country. No? Blessed or Saint Pope John the 23rd in his encyclical Mater et Magistra, ibig sabihin mother and teacher, aims at updating the already known documents and at taking a further step forward in the process of involving the whole Christian community. The key words in the encyclical are community and socialization. The church is called in truth, justice, and love to cooperate in building with all men and women an authentic communion. In this way, economic growth will not be limited to satisfying men's needs, but it will also promote their dignity. So yun yung kanyang social encyclical letter, si Saint John the 23rd, yung Mater et Magistra. At next, yung encyclical letter niyang Pacem in Terris, ibig sabihin peace on earth. Blessed Pope John the 23rd brings to the forefront the problem of peace in an era marked by nuclear proliferation. Okay? May nuclear threat, mga nuclear weapons. Moreover, Pacem in Terris, Peace on Earth, contains one of the first in-depth reflection on rights on the part of the Church. It is the encyclical of peace and human dignity. Yan yung Pacem in Terris. It continues and completes the discussion presented in Mater et Magistra and continuing in the direction indicated by Pope Leo XIII. It emphasizes the importance of the cooperation of all men and women. It is the first time that a church document is addressed also to all men of good will. Yan. All men of good will, who are called to a great task to establish with truth, justice, love, and freedom new methods of relationships in human society. Pacem in Terris, peace on earth, dwells on the public authority of the world community called to tackle and solve problems of an economic, social, political, or cultural character which are posed by universal common good. On the 10th anniversary of Pacem in Terris, Cardinal Maurice Roy, the President of the Pontifical Commission for Justice and Peace, sent Pope Paul VI a letter together with a document with a series of reflections on the different possibilities afforded by the teaching contained in Pope John the 23rd's encyclical for shedding light on the new problems connected with the promotion of peace. Okay. Ngayon papasok tayo sa Vatican II. Ang isang dokumento ng Vatican II na social doctrine ay yung Pastoral Constitution na Gaudium et Spes. Ibig sabihin ng Gaudium et Spes ay joy and hope of the Second Vatican Council is a significant response of the Church to the expectations of the contemporary world. In this constitution, in harmony with the ecclesiological renewal, a new concept of how to be a community of believers and people of God are reflected. It aroused new interest regarding the doctrine contained in the preceding documents, okay, on the witness and life of Christians as authentic ways of making the presence of God in the world visible. Gaudium et Spes presents the face of a church that cherishes a feeling of deep solidarity with the human race and its history, that travels the same journey as all mankind and shares the same earthly lot with the world, but which at the same time is to be a leaven and, as it were, the soul of human society in its renewal by Christ and transformation into the family of God. So Gaudium et Spes presents in a systematic manner the themes of culture, of economic and social life, of marriage and the family, of the political community, of peace and the community of peoples in the light of a Christian anthropological outlook and of the Church's mission. Everything is considered from the starting point of the person and with a view to the person, the only creature that God willed for its own sake. Society, its structures, and development must be oriented towards the progress of the human person. Yan po ang purpose ng development, progress of the human person. For the first time, the magisterium of the church at its highest level speaks at a great length about the different temporal aspects of Christian life. It must be recognized that the attention given by the Constitution to social, psychological, political, economic, moral, religious changes has increasingly stimulated the Church's pastoral concern for men's problems and dialogue with the world. Alright, kumesa pa yung importanteng nga dokumento dito'y Vatican II ket dito'y Declaration ti Dignitatis Humanae, the dignity of humans, in which the right to religious freedom is clearly proclaimed. The document presents the theme in two chapters. The first, of a general character, affirms that religious freedom is based on the dignity of the human person and that it must be sanctioned as a civil right in the legal order of society. Karapatan po natin ang religious freedom. Second chapter deals with the theme in the light of revelation and clarifies its pastoral implications, pointing out that it is a right that concerns not only people as individuals but also the different communities of people. Next, deto'y apo. Development is the new name for peace. Ito timbaga ni Pope Paul VI solemnly proclaims in his encyclical Populorum Progressio, the progress of people. Deto'y jay in report to Group 2 nga kasla 40 years nga panagrambak iti Populorum Progressio ti Caritas in Veritate ni Benedict XVI, which may be considered a development of the chapter on economic and social life in Gaudium et Spes in Developti Populorum Progressio, even while it introduces some significant new elements. In particular, it presents the outlines of an integral development of man and of a development in solidarity with all humanity. These two topics are to be considered the axis around which the encyclical is structured. In wishing to convene its receivers of the urgent need for action in solidarity, the Pope presents development as the transition from less humane conditions to those which are more humane and indicates its characteristics. This transition is not limited to merely economic or technological dimensions. Sanga lang deta ti progress ng bagbaga ni Pope Paul VI, but implies for each person the acquisition of culture, the respect of the dignity of others, the acknowledgement of the highest good, the recognition of God Himself, the author and end of these blessings. Development that benefits everyone responds to the demands of justice on a global scale that guarantees worldwide peace and makes it possible to achieve a complete humanism guided by spiritual values. Kaya nga po, noong 1967, ni Pope Paul VI ket in-establish na dito yung Pontifical Commission, Justitia et Pax. Ibig sabihin, justice and peace. Thus fulfilling the wishes of the Council Fathers who considered it most opportune that an organism of the Universal Church be set up in order that both the justice and love of Christ toward the poor might be developed everywhere. The role of such an organism would be to stimulate the Catholic community to promote progress in needy regions and international social justice. By initiative of Pope Paul VI, beginning in 1968, kada New Year Apu, the Church celebrates the first day of the year as the World Day of Peace. This same pontiff started the tradition of writing annual messages that deal with the theme chosen for its World Day of Peace. These messages expand and enrich the corpus of the Church's social doctrine. Kaya maganda rin na i-research yung mga tema since 1968 up to now, 2022, itong World Day of Peace. Kapag lahat ng tema ilagay mo 1968 to 2022, marami tayong masisynthesize na mga learnings sa social doctrine, no? So pwede ko rin itong i-research. All right. Gagawa tayo ng synthesis. All right. At the beginning of the 1970s, in climate of a turbulence and strong ideological controversy, okay, mga ideology ng communism and capitalism, Pope Paul VI returns to the social teaching of Pope Leo XIII and updates it. All right? On the occasion of the 80th anniversary of Rerum Novarum, with his apostolic letter Octogesima Adveniens, the Pope reflects on post-industrial society with all of its complex problems, noting the inadequacy of ideologies in responding to these challenges: urbanization, the condition of young people, the condition of women, unemployment, discrimination, immigration, population growth, the influence of the means of social communications, the ecological problem. Right. Ngayon papasok na tayo kay St. John Paul II. 90 years after Rerum Novarum, Pope John Paul II devoted the encyclical Laborem Exercens, ibig sabihin, in the exercise of labor, to work. Nag-concentrate si John Paul II sa work, the fundamental good of the human person, the primary element of economic activity, and the key to the entire social question. Laborem Exercens outlines the spirituality and ethic of work in the context of a profound theological and philosophical reflection. Ti pa nagtrabaho apukit saan lang agtrabaho ng madamit ti espiritualidad na. Work must not be understood only in the objective and material sense, but one must keep in mind its subjective dimension. It's so far as it's always an expression of the person. Kana sa saan lang nga di objective, di produkto nga maarami ti trabaho, ngem di contribution mi ti trabaho, iti pa nagdevelop ti may isang nga tao. Besides being a decisive paradigm for social life, work has all the dignity of being a context in which the person's natural and supernatural vocation must find fulfillment. All right. Mapantayon ti may katlo nga encyclical, no? May kadwa nga sa encyclical ni John Paul II. Dito apokit Solicitudo Rei Socialis, no? And sawin ket dagiti baro in solidarity of new things in the social life. Pope John Paul II commemorates the 20th anniversary of Populorum Progressio. Sino apo ti nagsurat ti Populorum Progressio? Ni Pope Paul VI, isa na siya ngayong santo, and deals once more with the theme of development along two fundamental lines. On one hand, the dramatic situation of the modern world under the aspect of the failed development of the third world, and on the other, the meaning of conditions and requirements for a development worthy of man. The encyclical presents differences between progress and development, and insists that true development cannot be limited to the multiplication of goods and services, to what one possesses, but must contribute to the fullness of the being of man. In this way, the moral nature of real development is meant to be shown clearly. Pope John Paul II, alluding to the motto of the pontificate of Pope Pius XII, Opus Justitiae Pax, peace is the fruit of justice, comments, today one could say with the same exactness and the same power of biblical inspiration, Opus Solidaritatis Pax, peace is the fruit of solidarity. Asidik ti malpasin apo. After 100 years ng Rerum Novarum, Pope John Paul II promulgates the third social encyclical, Centesimus Annus, ibig sabihin 100 years, whence emerges the doctrinal continuity of 100 years of the Church's social magisterium, taking up anew one of the fundamental principles of the Christian view of social and political organization, which had been the central theme of the previous encyclical. The Pope writes, "What we nowadays call the principle of solidarity is frequently stated by Pope Leo XIII, who uses the term friendship. Pope Pius XI refers to it with the equally meaningful term social charity. Pope Paul VI expanded the concept to cover the many modern aspects of the social questions. It speaks of a civilization of love." Pope John Paul II demonstrates how the Church's social teaching, okay, moves along the axis of reciprocity between God and men, recognizing God in every person and every person in God is the condition of the authentic human development. The articulate and in-depth analysis of the new things, and particularly of the great breakthrough of 1989. So yun, napaka-importante yung year 1989. Okay. Anong nangyari? Collapse of the Soviet system, yung communism, shows appreciation for democracy. Kaya ang the best form of government is still the democracy, kahit hindi ito perfecto, and the free economy in the context of an indispensable solidarity. So yan ang history ng social encyclicals, ang social doctrine of the church. Dito yan sa ating compendium of the social doctrine of the church, no? Yan. All right. So kaya nga yung pangalawang document ay Caritas in Veritate, kasi wala rito. Yung Laudato Si wala rin po rito, at also yung Fratelli Tutti. Okay? So sa next class natin, ang pag-aralan natin ay some other aspects, no? Especially sa human person and human rights. So, see you.